All right, welcome back. Again, my name is Patrick Payne, and in this video, we're going to move on and actually create our first simple web program using MVConnect. In this example, I am using JBase according to the earlier video where we demonstrate how to get JBase on Windows up and running. Everything I'm doing here will be identical for MVConnect running on other platforms except running JBase agent, which we can run right here from the prompt. That will be the only piece that will be different. The actual agent is already running in the background on MVConnect, and it's actually called MV App Server. And I'll have separate videos that go into the detail of the web server. But what we're going to do here is do the part that's all common, and we'll create our first program and demonstrate how we expose a service and how we talk to it. And I'll actually go through a couple mistakes I will make to show you common mistakes at this point and get you up and running your first program. So let's get started. What we want is to have two Accuterm sessions up here and running, logged into that sample account that I showed you in the prior video, how to install and get up and going. The one on the left, we're going to use Accuterm, and we're going to create our first program. So we're going to call it Hello World Routine, and we use a WED and start creating a program. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a very simple program. So we call wsend, and we're going to say hello from at user number at, and then we're going to say time date. Right? So, what is wsend? Wsend is a whole series of subroutines that we have supplied in MVConnect that allow you to interact with the web part of this. So in this case, this is like a print statement. Anything you do in wsend is sending data back to the browser. So in this case, we are really just telling it to say, hey, hello from, and we're going to return our pick line number, and we are going to say what is the current time and date. So we can see that it should rotate and change on that. Now it's just as simple as compiling our program. Then we can go to our second session and run the program. And there's our generated output. I like to use this as a moment to say, well, let's talk about debugging. We run it over here from Tickle to make sure it runs. If it doesn't run here, then it's just a simple pick coding problem, and you'll go over here and do your normal pick debugging until it generates output over here with no errors and no runtime errors. So that's number one. Two, notice it's a program. It's not a subroutine. Even though you're usually going to be writing this to interface with your system's business logic, this is a wrapper program that then executes and calls your business logic. And remember, when we doing here is that we can't call your subroutines directly because it's taking pick multi-value data. What we're really doing is taking the information from the web, which I'll talk about, doing a little bit of ETL to then set up a world and call our pick subroutines, get the answers, and then write it back the way that a web REST service would like to get it. Number two is quite often if you are using commons within your business platform, this allows you to insert your commons at this point. If it was a direct call to a subroutine, as you know, you can't then set up a common. You can do a name common, but if you're using legacy commons, those can only be set up in the first program that's executing the code. So that's why it being a program here. And then number two is you can actually then run it right from Tickle without having to write a wrapper routine. And as I start showing our built-in debugging tools, it'll start to make even more sense. So what have we accomplished? We got our first program and we're running here from Tickle, and you can see the output. What we want to do now is expose this out to the internet. And that's require two things. One, we got to set it up in what's called our WDB resource file, wdb.resource. And this file is a configuration file where we go and put the name of the resources we wish to expose. And then second, we actually have to have the web server up and running. So I'm going to pull up a browser window and we'll demonstrate here how we usually talk to it. Now, this is going to be the second difference based on being on JBase or MVConnect on other platforms, is you're going to say HTTP://localhost, that's talking to your own machine, 2002, if you're using JAgent on your own box, per the videos I'm doing here, API, which is the name of the resource group, and by default it always has an API resource group set up, and this is all done within the actual web server setup tools for MVConnect or JAgent, but by default it always has API. And what I like to do right here is that let's first verify the web server's running, and we supply a testing program called WREST-test, and when you type that in and press enter, it will test the service. Now, if you're on MVConnect, this part will be different. If you're doing your development on your machine and your server is over at a different location, you would have put in the IP address of your machine, colon, so let's just say, for example, it would have been HTTP, something like, let's say 198.168.0.1. And again, this is going to be based on your admins. This is where when you open up AccuTerm and you telnet somewhere, or Secure Shell, whatever address you're given, that's where that is. And then 8080 is usually the port that it's running on there, and then everything else will be the same. Everything else I talk about here will be exactly the same. So in our case, we are developing on our own machine, 2002 API REST test, and we run this first and go, does the service work? And in this case, it's not working. And the reason is because I'm not running the web server. Remember, this is on JBase. So here, right from my account, I'm going to say run the JBase agent, which is our web server, and I'm going to say config equals. And what this means is it will pull the config file, the default config file, from the JBase installation directory's configuration directory. And usually as we get later, and there'll be other videos that talk about this, that when you start really setting up this as a service for JBase, you'll actually go in and take that config file and update it, and then set up a service and get it fired up. If you're on MVConnect, all this would have been a default install. It would have created an MVDB account. Now with JBase, what's nice is that when we run this from here, it will take the environment and the account that we're currently in and set up JAgent to work correctly in that account. So it's up and running. Now I go back over here and tell it to reload, and you notice it responds to me, and on the left side we see output. And what this tells me is that MVConnect is up and running, and it's running correctly. And I can see here what account it's running on, what line number, what path it was in. It actually, this is all more JBase specific stuff, where it outputs a lot of the system setup information, but it also tells you, hey, what vars were sent, what cookies were sent, what headers were sent. As you get more into web development, and I get later here, the stuff will, become very important. And really, when I'm talking about what is REST, REST is really just calling a subroutine, and there's about 3 to 4 different ways that what we would call parameters. We call subroutine with parameter A, B, C, and D. In the web, it's kind of like, hey, there was variables sent in, there was headers sent in, there was a body sent in, status message. It's all the same thing, and they can have multiple sub-objects within an object like headers. So, later videos I'll be showing you how to take that and move back and forth between this format and JSON and back and forth. But here you're able to see an echo of the world back. So I know that the service is working. Now what we need to do is create one for Hello World. So what we'll do is we'll just break out of our JAgent, this WDB resource, and we will see what an existing one looks like. So let's look at WREST test, which should always be there because it is in the default, and we see a standard format for a WDB resource item. So we're going to go over here and do the actual creation of ours for Hello World over here, and it's a P for the first word. And then we're going to say just a description on line 2. This is for you, so I'm going to say sample hello world application. And 3 is the important part. This is what the name of the program that is going to execute here. 4 is legacy for dashboard. 5 and 6 are both always 1. These are both legacy items still for the old platform. And then 7, which you don't see filled out here, that is whether or not to do debugging. I'm going to tell it yes. And then 8 is to actually go look for this resource in another account. And then essentially it executes a log to. We'll have a later video that talks more into that for purposes of us doing this sample in JBase. And we're running it directly out of this Z 2018 sample account. We're not using that on this one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and save it here. And for people to notice, I'm going to make a mistake here. Is that I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to save this in the WD resource file, and now I'm going to say what I want to call it. And I'm going to make a mistake here, because if you notice, all the items had resource group, asterisk, resource name. I'm making a mistake here and forgetting to put that on there. So now when I list WDB resource, I see a hello world in there, but notice it doesn't follow the right format. If I go over now to here, and remember it's resource group API, which is always what we're going to use, and then the name of our program. And in web, this section is not case sensitive, so I put a lowercase. First thing it says, hey, the website's not running because I have JBase turned off. So it now hit it, reran it, and it says invalid resource because it can't find an API asterisk hello world in that file. So I won't do that as a mistake because it's quite often when people are first going through this is a common mistake. So this is basically, if you're a pick person, it's think of WDB resource almost like the MD or VOC, and that's how we're cataloging items in there. And so it's looking at that resource file and saying, I can't find it. So I go back over. I see that, oh, I forgot to call it that. So I'm going to say save as API hello world. Now I go back over here, rerun it, and it's now working. So what we've now done is we have jumped in and got our web server up and going. Again, with MVConnect, it would have been running in the background, but here we're running it in the foreground. We've created our first little sample pick program, and I am now generating output to your browser window. And so that's the fundamentals. In this video, we have established the basic fundamentals, the basic hello world that we're now building web applications. So thank you for listening to this. And in the next video, I will start moving into, we'll take this program and start passing some variables in. We'll start showing then a little bit more of the debugging within the pick side to find out, hey, why is it not returning back things I'm looking for? And we'll also talk about Postman, which is the common testing tool out there that you use instead of Chrome to have more control over the payloads that you're sending in. So thank you, and see you in the next one.